Jason Weigandt here, NBC Sports, host of Lucas Oil Pro Motocross, which will start August 15th. But there's a bit of a change for the series in 2020, and that is the largest amateur motocross event of the year. We'll also end up hosting the first professional race of the season. And the amateur race at Loretta Lynn's Ranch in Tennessee has a great history of grooming potential pro racers. But one of the odd things is we're joined by someone who turned out to be a pro in a completely different sport. We've got NASCAR Cup Series driver number 14, Clint Bowyer, with us. But Clint, you cut your teeth as a motocross racer. You raced here from 88 to 94 at Loretta's. But for the first time ever, they're putting the big bikes and the pros on this track next weekend. It should be pretty crazy.
It should be perfect, actually. I couldn't think of a better racetrack. The craziest thing about Loretta's is I remember as a little kid when you get there, we grew up in Kansas, right? Just dreaming, just like all the rest of the amateur kids growing up, about getting to Loretta's, working your tail off with your folks, with your family, everybody doing everything right so you can qualify for the royalty of Loretta Lynn's and get there and look over and there's cows grazing on the racetrack. You're like, well, where's the racetrack? And then all of a sudden, boy, the sawdust shows up and they start grooming that racetrack to become one of the most grueling tracks that literally I ever recall being on. So if you can overcome that place, I think you can overcome anything. I mean, that place is groomed so many professional racers, obviously not me being a motocrosser, but all the big boys have all come through Loretta Lynn's. I remember getting my tail and my teeth kicked in by this little Ricky Carmichael punk kid that was a pain in all of our butts. God, he would just destroy us there. And I knew then that I needed to get out of there and try to figure out another profession, because if I had to beat him week in and week out, there was no chance I was going to be able to do that.
Yeah, he is one of the all-time greats. But like you said, pretty much every pro has come through here. So most of the riders we'll see that are battling next weekend, whether it's Eli Tomac or Cooper Webb, they've all won championships here. But this whole experience is kind of a homecoming for these riders because, as you've explained, it's not just getting here, it's the whole experience of being here. So everybody's going to have some great memories for their homecoming.
Some of my best memories in all of my career were at Loretta Lynn's. Being down there camping as a family that week, back then coming off of Ponca City, everybody was coming there. I mean, how we kind of grew up, Ricky and Big Rick and Jeannie, they'd come to our house in Kansas. We'd ride a little bit, go to Ponca together, and then we would take off from there and go to Loretta Lynn's and camp together. And again, literally some of the best times that I ever recall being at a racetrack was at Loretta Lynn's. From going back and doing the rope swing to, my gosh, pushing bikes all the way up there to, the events and things that were at the pavilion. I mean, just such a good time there. Huge country music fan, always have been, and probably a large part due in fact the fact that I grew up racing at Loretta Lynn's house. So to meet her, now that I'm an adult and I've met people in the country music business, I've met her a time or two. Again, it's funny how life works. I have a friend that has a hunting ranch just right down the road. And I remember getting off of that exit and I looked over my shoulder. I'm like, are we where I think we are? And he's like, what do you mean? I was like, is Loretta Lynn's Dude Ranch, is it right up here on the right? He goes, yeah. So I'm like, dude, I grew up going there as a kid for a week of just gnarly racing. So just a few years ago, actually 2 or 3 years ago, I drove through there and just to revisit it all and drove all down through the campsites and still the same old Loretta's, but boy, has it built to be something pretty magical.
Yeah, and that's the experience that the pro riders are all going to get as well, because they're having their little homecoming and they'll probably look at some of the old areas they hung out when they were kids, but it's going to be much more serious now. So if you're thinking about this track, what do you think as far as putting pro motorcycles and pro riders out here? It usually leads to good racing. Do you think that could translate on the pro side?
Always has. And it's one of those simple things, the fundamentals, but you got to be tough, man. You got to gut that place out. There's no trick set up that's going to get you through, or a trick line that's, a guy that is doing that nobody else sees. I mean, it's pretty fundamental, right? Pretty elementary as far as rhythm sections or things like that, but all the time is within hitting those marks. It gets rough. Oh my God, I remember that place getting rough. Hot, boy, it was hot. I'm talking grueling conditions. Everybody always asks us what it's like in these cars. I'm like, hey, let me tell you something. It ain't nothing like a moto at Loretta's. I think that's all the good tracks. And again, it doesn't matter if you're on 2 wheels or 4 wheels. 9 times out of 10, some of the best racetracks are the most old school, just elementary, nothing crazy, nothing flashy. Always end up leading to some of the best racing possible. I mean, if I think of a comparison in what I do on 4 wheels, I'm thinking Martinsville all day long. Just an old school racetrack that's always put on a good show and always will.
I know as a motocross guy at heart, you probably follow it. We had a great Supercross season with Eli Tomac winning the title, Cooper Webb, Ken Roxon all in the mix. We should have Marvin Musquin back from injury. So it should be a pretty fun season, and with a little unknown of the track they haven't raced in a while. So it should be fun to watch.
Yeah, phenomenal racing. Always has been. Again, I was always partial to Ricky growing up with him and visiting and with him and being friends over the years, especially now that we're adults and things like that. But to see how far racing has come. And again, I live it every day in the NASCAR world. I mean, it just evolves. And what they've done with Supercross racing and motocross racing on the outdoors is just phenomenal. Their physique, these guys are true athletes. I always argue the best athletes in the world are on 2 wheels on motocross. And I do believe that. And it's amazing to watch these guys do what they do, whether it's in a stadium or outside of the track like Loretta's. So you bet your butt I'll be tuned in.
Yeah, any particular riders these days that you're following when you get a chance to?
I love Roxon being out there and coming back from that injury. I mean, I remember, I'll never forget it when he posted those pictures of him laying there in the hospital bed. I mean, it was just, you just almost wanted to cry for the guy. Like, he's done, and I knew what it took to get to where he was at. And from what I thought, and probably he thought or anybody else thought, it's over. You're right. It's over right then and there. So as long as he's on a racetrack, I'll always be pulling for him, because what he had to go through to get back on top where he's at is pretty phenomenal.
Absolutely. All right. Well, it's going to be a really good time. The homecoming for a lot of the professional riders. You're going to be busy in a different profession, but good luck in your races as well. And that's Stewart Haas, number 14. Thanks for giving us some time and going down memory lane.
Yeah, man. Thanks. Can't wait to watch.